Planting at least one tree in your garden can have a massive impact. It can provide structure and also provide habitat for local wildlife. If you follow this step-by-step guide, you'll be giving your tree the best start to life. So one of the first things you need to do before you plant a tree in your garden is make sure you're planting the right tree in the right space. And if you want to know a little bit more about species selection, then visit the last episode of this masterclass series to learn a little bit more. Once you've selected the right tree for the right place, what you need to do then is make sure that you're planting at the right time of year. The best time of year to plant trees normally is between November and March during the dormant season. And what you're looking for is nice moist conditions, but you don't want it to be too waterlogged or too frozen. So if we look here, we're kind of getting this kind of nice moist, but not too waterlogged or anything like that. So it's these kind of conditions that you're best planting trees in at this time of year. So before you plant the tree, you probably just want to have a good look around it and make sure that it's healthy and make sure that it's got good vigorous growth. It's got a clear top leader there. And then also just check the root ball, make sure there's no weeds in there. That will make sure that the nursery or the garden centre have been looking after it, doing the good stewardship. And then once you've done that, you can then take off, and you can do this in the garden centre or the nursery, is take the pot off. And it's always worth having a little look just at the stock that you're buying, particularly have a good look at the root ball. What you're looking for is you're looking for some of these nice fine roots here. The last thing you want is lots of dense fibrous roots wrapping around the pot. That just shows that it's been in the pot too long, and actually the root development would be a lot slower, and you potentially get a tree that doesn't establish. So once you've given the tree a good once over, you're now ready to start digging the hole. What I like to do is go about 2 times the size of the root ball. This gives it enough space just so the roots can start proliferating out. And I also like to do square holes. What this means is that as the roots start growing out from the root ball, they hit the edges of the wall and then they go straight into the surrounding soil profile. So what I do is I generally just draw a little square with my spade, about 2 times the size of the root ball, so something like that in that space. And then once I've got that general shape and the outline, I'll take away the vegetation layer. We don't need that anymore because we'll start again, and what I'm going to do is put the rest of the soil onto this mat further along, so you can put that into the compost bin or wherever it needs to go. So once you've got rid of all the vegetation off the top, I put that to the side now because we no longer need it. You're ready to start digging down. What I like to do is I like to have a board next to me just to make it easy and clean to put it all back. But what I do is as I'm going down the soil profiles, I put them into separate piles. So I'll put a little bit of topsoil there. I'll put the next layer, which could be sand or clay, in the next one, and just match that soil profile. So as you're backfilling it, you match it to the surrounding ground so that the tree is straight away into the environment that it's going to get used to. Making sure that you dig down at the right depth is one of the most crucial elements. You don't want to dig down too much, because what could happen is over time, the soil around the area will start to build up around the tree stem, and you'll end up having a rotten base over time. So just be really careful that you don't go too deep. And once you do get to the right depth, just make sure the bottom of that pit is really firm so that you don't get any sinkage after you've planted the tree. So I think I'm at about the right depth now. So what I like to do at this stage is I just get the tree and I'll put it in the hole and just measure it up, and just making sure that I just don't go a little bit too deep. So I put that there. And then if you've got a straight edge here, I'm going to use the stake that I'm going to stake the tree with. You can measure a flat edge just off the side, and that'll just give you a good idea of how the root ball sits in across all of the sides. So as you can see there, I'm almost perfect. It's probably about an inch high at this stage, but I'm completely happy with that. It's better to be slightly above ground level than below ground level. Just gives you that little bit of extra movement if it does sink a little bit, the root ball. But it also means you can just mound it up gently over the top. So once you're happy with the depths and you've checked all the angles, you're ready to then start doing the fun bit, which is making sure that it looks its best, making sure you're getting it from the right angle. So depends on where you're going to be looking at it, from the garden or the aspects that you've got where you're planting it. You can start just tweaking it around. You can also, at this stage, you probably, particularly if it's got a central stem, you want to make sure that that's level at this point. So you can just start having a little bit of a tweak so it feels like this can kind of just come over. Just make sure that that spine is going to be perfectly straight and as you want it to be. It's going to look best from all the angles that you're going to see it from. So once you're happy with the position of it, we're ready to start backfilling the hole. So this is where it comes back to what the dividing the soil profiles. So obviously I want to put the deeper stuff where we've got the sandier stuff back in the hole first, and then we'll follow through with the topsoil afterwards. So just as you're putting all of the soil back in the hole, it's important just to make sure that you're not getting any air holes going around the edges. So any little tight gaps, don't be afraid just to get your hands in there and just make sure that that soil's nicely compacted in there. And then on the bigger bits, just gently with your foot, you can just heel it in slightly. You don't want to compact the ground, but you just want to make sure it's firm enough for the tree to hold. So I've now backfilled to the point again where the sand was. I'm going to move on. I know I've got a little bit of leftover, but that's perfectly fine. That's quite common. So what I'll do is I'll start matching in the topsoil profile now, and I'll use all of this nice topsoil just to finish the hole off. So I think I'm about there now. You'll notice that there's a slight bulge just above where it mounds up. I'm completely happy with that, just being slightly above the existing ground level. It just gives us that little bit of wiggle room if it does decide to sit down a little bit and sink. As I said before, the most important thing is that we don't leave soil around the stem of the tree. Once I've done this now, I'm ready to start mulching. So we have, here we have a mulch mat, and you can get these from garden centres. But all it does is it basically just acts as a bit of a weed suppression before we put the mulch down, and just holds that little bit of extra moisture in. And I'll start to just tidy everything up and take the labels off. And then we've got this lovely mulch here, which is the thick bark mulch. Trees are quite happy to have something quite thick, so the thick bark mulch is fine, but any organic matters will work, but the thicker the better normally. So if you just gently place the mulch around the base like this, you want a good thick layer, maybe 5, 6, 7 centimetre deep, so a decent application of mulch around the tree. It'll keep the roots nice and warm in the winter, but then also just hold that moisture in for you in the summer as well, so you have to water much less. And just make sure again that you're not just building up too much around that stem. Last thing you want is just to build the mulch too high. There we go, and I think we're looking about there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy up my workspace, and then we'll stake the tree. So I'm ready to stake my tree now. Not all trees will need to be staked. It depends on what your garden's like. If it's quite exposed to the wind, then I definitely recommend putting one on. But all they're really doing is just giving the tree a little bit of stability until it can put its own roots down and put its own stability into the ground. So particularly over during the winter months, it's useful just to have a stake on. So what I'm looking for is a spot where we can just find out a little bit where there's not going to damage any branches. A lot of trees will be clear stemmed and you'll be able to find a spot quite easily. And then you want to put the angle into the prevailing wind as well, just so it holds that a little bit harder. And then once you're happy with the angle and it's going into the prevailing wind, you're ready just to go in. It's really important to avoid going into the root ball wherever you can. So that's about there now. So just give it a little check, and it doesn't need to be too firm, as long as it's just going to give that extra little bit of stability to the tree. So once you're happy that that's stable enough, I'll get my band in, and I'll just estimate how much I'm going to need. So probably going to be about that much. Just give yourself a little bit extra, because you can always trim it up afterwards. So we take that off. And then you just need a claw hammer and then some tacks as well. I use roofing tacks. And what we'll do is once you've got that, is you can just put the one end onto your stake at the back there. Yeah, so once that's firm there, I'll then get my block. I'll just put that in between, and that just stops the tree from rubbing on the stake and damaging the bark. Just give it a little bit of, just soften it off, and then it doesn't need to be too tight, just give it a little bit of room there, and then just wrap it round on itself, and then you can apply one more small nail at the back. So that's nice there. It's got a little bit of movement in it. Just that block, as I say, is just going to stop that rubber rubbing against the wood and just damaging the bark. And that's that done. The final thing to do now is, it depends if you need to. If you have rabbits or deer or anything that can get access to your garden, then certainly for the first few years I'd recommend putting some guards on, and it'll just stop them stripping and damaging the bark. So these can just be applied at the bottom. And if you've got a few little branches, that's not an issue. You can just go around those and then bring that round. Just kind of make sure there's enough space around. I'd be tempted just to cut that off there now, just because it's starting to branch off. And then get rid of that bit and tidy that up there. And that should just stop any animal damage just at the base of the tree. Keep it tidy. So the last thing to do before we finish is make sure we give it a really good water. I've planted this into sandy soil, so I'll make sure that the root ball's nice and wet, and I'll keep coming back to it just to make sure that it stays moist, particularly during the summer and spring months where it starts to dry out. But if you're working in clay, then you might have to do it a little less regularly. So that's us done now. If you follow that step-by-step guide, you're going to give your tree the best start to life it possibly can get. If you want to know a little bit more about maintaining, nurturing it and bringing it on to the next stage of its life, please visit our next episode in the Masterclass series, Aftercare. Thanks for joining.